Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Yulia Pasichna, and Yulia joins me from the Ukraine. So we are definitely in different time zones right now while we're recording this. And once again, I'm so thankful for technology that we can have conversations. But Yulia, first of all, just welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm so glad you're with us today.
I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, I'm certain that our audience would just like to get to know you a little bit more. And so let's just start right there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and your ministry. Tell us a little bit about that before we start jumping in and talking about support raising.
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Yulia. I live in Ukraine all my life. I am married. I have my husband. We met at church when we were teenagers and we started dating immediately, got married. Now we have two little kids, which is awesome and hard at the same time, as those who have kids know. They are 2 and 5. I serve with Josiah Venture Ukraine as a missionary for full time around 7 years, and before that I helped them with 5 more years. So it's pretty almost 15 years as I serve at this organization.
Cool. Very cool. Tell us a little bit about what your job is at Josiah Ventures these days.
These days, my main job is the country admin. So I have like 3 things primarily I'm doing. First is translation. So I do translate a lot of stuff into Ukrainian and Russian. Is like even Bibles, books, training materials, discipleship tools, websites, all of that our team or our country needs in order to do the ministry better. Another is support raising and ministry partnership development for the nationals here. So I care for 10 of our nationals and help them be fully funded, but also have a lot of tools, even not only for our team, but even for Ukraine, since it's not a lot of them. And another is the admin. So we have national organization and all of that like legal stuff, like bank accounts, lawyers, all of that. So that's my role to stay connected to them and do the ministry officially here in Ukraine.
Very good. Very awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this in English. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
I could not have this conversation in Ukrainian or Russian. Yulia, actually, I have a couple of nephews who were adopted from Ukraine as teenagers. And so your accent, so to speak, sounds very familiar to me.
That's cool.
I really enjoy it.
Yeah, we call it Ukrainian-English.
Ukrainian-English. I like it. Well, very cool. Well, of course, our podcast is about support raising. And Yulia, a lot of our audience are people that are fairly new to the idea of raising support. Not all of them are Americans, of course. We have a lot of listeners from all over the world. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited that you could join us today is we do tend to most often have Americans on the podcast and speaking to this topic. I think it's a matter of easy access for me and language barriers and things like that. But we have certainly had people from other countries, Eastern Asia and just different places that have joined us as well. And having you on here today too, I think is important because one of the things that we're seeing is that frequently, people think that the idea of raising and or living on support is kind of an American idea, right?
Oh, it is.
Right. Yeah. That's seen all over the place. And yet we know that Paul raised and lived off support. We know that Jesus lived off support. And I think they might have grown up closer to Ukraine than they did to the United States. And so there's a there's more to learn on this topic, right?
For sure.
And so, tell us, what was fundraising like for you, but before you connected with some of the resources and some of the biblical truth that has to do with raising support. Like, for instance, I believe that our friend Mark Wilson had told me that at one point you connected with the God Ask book and with SRS. So what was fundraising like for you before you came across those resources?
Well, as you said, it's not typical for us in Ukraine or even probably Europe to raise support. And we usually expected that someone will just come, just support us with money, or like churches or even like pastors. In my entire life, I only knew one or two pastors that are funded by church or like live on support. Most of them combine work and ministry. That's why for
Mhm.
me to even agree to start working and to be funded like this, it was something like no. And so I denied the invitation to join the ministry for maybe like year and a half, only because of that reason. I said I will not ask people to support me. So
Mhm.
it was interesting, but also hard when I started. A lot of like things had to break in my heart and my mind and my head. At the same time, I realized that I am not able to do it in Ukraine, like to look for partners, because no one will support me because it's not what you do, you know?
Mhm.
Like, so usually we expect some Americans or maybe like from Germany or even England, wherever, not from our own country to support us,
Okay.
which was until maybe a few years ago
Okay.
started changing. Yeah.
So that was definitely a support. I mean, a big support challenge
Yes.
that early on, at least, it sounds like there's been some changes. I want to hear about that, but let's start right there. When you first started realizing that you felt called to raise support, it didn't seem like a very, at least strategic idea to try and do it right there in your community. Is that what I heard you say? I don't want to put
Yes.
words in your
For example, I never shared with my church, like entire church, about my ministry because I just knew and I felt they will not accept it right, you know? They will not
mouth.
get it just because it's not like it's so out of the frames or borders that we are living in, so
Hmm.
people will not get it. Now I regret probably I had a chance to change them, but at that time it was like 7 8 years ago. I
Hmm.
I was not doing that, and I probably um, would not get the good feedback from them if I would do.
Right, right. And by the way, Yulia, if it's any encouragement to you at all, that is certainly something that I have heard before from other areas of the world. It is that very idea. There's a nuance there to what you just said that, yeah, you actually can raise support even in a place where it's not normal, but it is difficult.
Yeah,
And there are some relational challenges. And of course, you can even get into some kind of church order and philosophy of ministry and theological, like you can get into a lot of conversations other than the finances if you engage in that way. And so it sounds like I heard you say that you didn't, but now you're wondering if you could have, but then you just didn't, so don't worry about it now. And yet yeah, you said something what was it you said about you? Did you say regret? You say you wish you would have to. Tell me a little
yeah.
bit about what
I
you've learned. I mean, because you're several years down the road now. So, what's perspective look like?
Yeah, I regret now because I see it as the opportunity to change my church or even people's mind and their even stereotypes, you know,
Hmm.
because now I am more confident in what I'm doing and that this is actually like really God's calling and well, it's the privilege for them to support me, even
Yeah.
financially or prayerfully. At that time, I didn't think like that. I was more like focused on, you know, like only like money or asking for financial support. With
Right.
now, as my heart changed and my perspective changed, which
Mm.
is more about relationships and a big vision, not only like certain amount of money.
Right. Right. Oh, I really appreciate you sharing that. The way you phrased that, the way you said that, we have a friend who's on staff with Support Raising Solutions, and her name is Callie. And at the time when we're recording this, it's Callie Buchholz, but she's about ready to get married soon. So I'm not sure if by the time this records, this will be if she'll have a different last name or not. But in the meantime, Callie likes to say it's not about the money. It's not about the money, and yet that doesn't make it easy, because the idea of going to people and asking for money, that I promise you this, Yulia, that's intimidating and something that people don't want to do, don't look forward to doing everywhere in the world. I've never had anybody go, oh, that's easy. I'm just going to ask everybody I know for money and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what you talked about a process where your heart changed. Tell us a little bit more about what moved you from realizing, okay, this really isn't just the money. I had the opportunity to invite people. So what changed in you, and at what point did you start? I guess this is a follow-up question then. What did that look like when you began to say, I am going to start inviting some of my countrymen to be a part of my team?
Yeah. Well, at first, I think I saw the ministry as like something small, like what I'm doing. I always was an admin, like sitting behind the computer and yeah, I'm doing the reports or emails or like support my team and making their life easier. But at the same time, I didn't see the significance of my job or my part in this mission or in this ministry. And with the time, I just and also with the support of the team, as how they encouraged me, or how they even talked about my help and how my work influenced their ministry, or my translation or whatever I was doing. It changed my view, especially on my role, which helped to me to see this as the big thing for God. It's not huge. Of course, we can do more all the time, but still, it was not something super small and not interesting to people. When I started to see this, I realized, well, that changes everything. I'm doing something huge, and I want them to be part of it. So it changed from something small. Can you support this not interesting ministry to hey, this is huge, and yeah, we are going to reach youth in Ukraine and you can be part of it. Would you like to join us? So it changed everything.
I've never tried that. Hey, could you support this small, not interesting ministry? Wow.
That's what I did at the beginning, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's both funny, not funny, right? Because
True.
God's using you in a powerful way, and through your ministry. I mean, you're involved. Josiah Venture does a lot of things, but there's a camp that you're involved with. You're changing people's lives, so it's not small, right?
Yeah, I didn't see this. I translated the camp talks and I thought, okay, it took me a week. I just translated and printed them. But then after that, when people shared that, okay, we had 200 young people, all of them heard the camp talks, half of them repented. That changed, my work. It started to be not just translating, but seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. That gives me kind of little goosebumps. Because
maybe you would like to join our ministry.
There you go. Look at that. Oh wow, she's ready. You just did the see, what is it you call it? You don't call it the God asked. You call it the God. What's the term you use?
I forgot.
Is it God of request? Is that the book? Is it because I think you helped translate the God asked book, didn't you?
I did. That was my biggest project. Yeah.
That was your biggest project. Okay. And so you got hold of the God Ask book, and I think the title that you ended up with was God's Request or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going off a Facebook post you had from like 3 months ago or something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, wow, this is fascinating. So, okay. So tell us, if you would, like, I thank you so much for sharing. Just being upfront about this whole process with you. So you began to realize, no, I get to invite people to something that's really big. I'm putting words in your mouth here. What I'm doing isn't this small little uninteresting thing. It's a big thing that's changing lives. So what happened? Tell me, what happened when you actually said, you know what, I need to raise some more support, or like, what was a transition for you, Yulia, when you said, oh, okay, you know what, even though I initially raised most of my support elsewhere, I'm going to raise some support here. Tell us about that process, and maybe even about what you did the first time or two.
Yeah. So first it started with like all of our teammates, nationals, usually when they starting the ministry, they are going to the States to look for support. So
Okay.
it was like also the typical situation, which
Sure.
didn't work for me because at the time when I started, I don't remember why, either because of visa or some circumstances, I was not able to go to the States. Then the second time I was supposed to go, I got pregnant, and I was like 8 months pregnant. And I realized, okay, I'm not able to go for 2 months to the States. So
Right.
that put me in a place where I started to think like, why do I need to go to the States? Like, why is this like, it's not like the wallet country, like there's a lot of people. And if I'm looking for partners, they are here, right here. So it started with the circumstances, changed my like also perspective. Like you don't need to go somewhere to look for partners. You can just do it here. I just, I was always like excited about after that switch in my heart and mind, I became more excited about everything I was doing. So I was more like active in just telling people the stories, talking about my ministry. Actually, never had like this, like real presentation as at all of the trainings they talk. You need to have the presentation. I do believe you need to have it. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't have it. But because I was so excited about what I was doing, it was enough. When people were coming, I was sharing, and I just built friendship, and it helped. Like it started from friendship and like small talks with people, Ukrainians, also foreigners, wherever I was going, and it was more natural and I. To be honest, I didn't work like super hard. Didn't like I don't know. I didn't like put too much of myself. It was just what I was doing, and it was natural because I was so excited about what I'm doing. And I do believe it helps. If you know what are you doing and why are you doing this, well, there's not a lot of stuff you have to add. Just
Right.
you just share about it.
Just a brief sidebar here to our listeners. Perhaps you've wanted to recruit someone to your staff team but aren't sure how to broach the topic of support raising without either scaring them away or shoving a full copy of the God-ass book into their hands. So wouldn't you like an 8-page booklet that might calm their fears and quickly unpack the basic how-tos from a practical and biblical perspective? We actually have a booklet like that. It's called The 5 Keys to Support Raising, and you can get these booklets in English or in Spanish at cmmpress.org. You'll receive an additional 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
And there is a lot to learn. Like I've had a conversation many times with people where I've said, hey, the most important thing in all this is being spiritually healthy and, and being obedient. And if God's telling you to do this, do it. Now, how you go about doing it, you might learn some lessons. You might learn some things to do. I think even Yulia, even in the United States, and of course, globally right now, there's a lot of us that have had to learn how to have meetings and interact with people over video calls. That is not something that I like very much. I don't know about you, but I've gone from maybe 1 or 2 video calls a week to, I might have 2 or 3 in a morning sometimes. And so our communication pattern has changed as well. But back to this whole process with you. I do want to hear more about what you've learned, particularly like in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. But I also don't want to put words in your mouth. But it sounds like you moved, at least in your head and heart. And please correct me if I'm saying this wrong. But it sounds like you moved from a place of some biblical understanding of raising support, but not wanting to do it around you, to a more biblical understanding, as well as I believe you interacted with some of the support raising solutions resources like Foundations and the God Ask, and you began, like, you moved to a place of like excitement. You moved to a place of empowering and engaging and mobilizing your countrymen to be a part of the Great Commission work. And it sounds like you went from like fear and trepidation to excitement, and I'm just going to do this. God's got people right here. Like, people can say no, but some of them are going to say yes, and I'm just going to do it. Is that a fair, like, is that what I'm hearing, or would you say it differently?
Yeah, it's like, I knew that there's something like that in the Bible, and I knew, like, in general, when you serve, it's kind of like cool because you're Christian, you serve your God, probably he likes it. At the same time, I didn't have strong biblical foundation for sure. And when I met like SRS and the Foundations, learning this online tool, it's like, it goes like 6 or 7 chapters from it only about Bible. And that was like, wow to me, because I knew that should be something in the Bible, and I knew about Levites or Paul or Jesus for sure, but also other examples that I learned from that online tool. It was super helpful because it was like clear, because we had the system, how to do it. We had the training, everything, and we had the Bible part in it for sure. But it was not like so clear to me. So with that, I went to this online tool. I would say like every other week, just to remind myself all of the passages, and till now even, because this what changed my heart, and because I saw how God views this. And all of that videos from SRS online is like it's vertical. Like you ask God and people give to God, and that what changed me. It's like, it's not people give to me and I should like be afraid to spend this money, or you only spend it to some spiritual and good stuff. But it's like people give to God and I receive it from God, and I also give it to God through my ministry. So that what changed my perspective and my heart in this.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a hard issue. It really is a hard issue.
It was for sure.
That's global. And I'll tell you, Yulia, I in the United States, at least, I know some other countries too, we have postgraduate work. And but yeah, I went to seminary. I had a graduate degree, so I had like a master's degree in Christian education, and I read all these books and I had these fancy letters. Anyway, all this being said, I really had never thought about, dug into, read about raising support from a biblical standpoint at all. And so I had a hard issue years ago when I first started raising support, because I didn't get it. And I was also a little embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I didn't get it because, I went to seminary. I read the Bible more than most
you
people.
You should be embarrassed. Yeah. At least the seminary people should get it. Yeah.
Right. We're Jesus 2.0, right?
Yeah.
No. So there was some pride and humility. And yeah, it was a hard issue for me as well. Even though obviously we grew up in different countries and different experiences and things like that. I think that's really the biggest thing. So often with people that are they need to raise support, they perhaps might even feel that God's calling them to raise support. There's some head and heart things that have to be worked through, and even in many cases, I would say, I go so far as to say there's some obedience. There's that step of faith of, okay, God, I prayed for somebody to ask. You just put this person in front of me. I don't want to ask them. Give me somebody different, God.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've experienced something like that in Ukraine as well.
for sure. I just expected people will ask me about my ministry, but no one did actually. So
Right, yeah. or for the money to magically show up in your bank account, right?
still hoping for that, but yeah.
So true, so true. Okay, so tell us a little bit if and I realize that you don't have a uniquely American experience, but you've spoken with enough Americans and not just Americans, but other English speakers. You've spoken with enough people. It would be interesting for you to share with podcast listeners what are some interesting nuances or just kind of unique things to raising support in Ukraine or Eastern Europe that you have found maybe like, hey, here's I don't know if I want to call it a strategy necessarily, but perhaps so. But here's something I've learned about doing a God ask. Here's something I've learned in my area of the world about inviting people to join my team. Here's an important step or something I try and explain. So share with us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you just need to know what are you doing and why are you doing this in your heart and mind. Again, it's about your heart and your mind. Like if you know why are you doing what are you doing, if you like fully in it, you will be able to share it with others so that way they can feel it as you do. For example, like if you are really like love someone, you want to share with whole world that you love this man or woman or like your wife or husband, and people will just see it even without words. And for me, it was the same with the ministry. If I do care for these young people who are going to hell and who are not even having the community to be and to share and to be open, I like if it's in my heart and my heart really breaks for them and for it, like I am going to share and people will feel it. So important to know what are you doing and why are you doing what are you doing. It's not just because you have a lot of time and you don't want to have a regular boss and you think Christians are cool and it's a lot of grace. It is true. Christians are cool. There's a lot of grace. At the same
I don't know.
time,
You haven't spent much time with me. I'm not that cool.
we can talk more. You don't know yourself. You're cool. But at the same time, you need to know exactly what they're doing. And also with sharing, it doesn't matter if it's Americans, foreigners from your own country. I think it's important that it is about relationships, not money, because people feel it. And I felt it on myself. For example, if someone reached out to me and someone who doesn't even know me and they ask for support, and they did great presentation. They shared about ministry. It was interesting, but they didn't know in what situation I am, for example, or they didn't even ask. For me, it felt like only like selling my ministry, like what I'm talking about. They kind of like wanted to sell me what they were doing and get paid for that. So that's how I felt. And for me, that helped me to understand that I'm not selling Jesus, but it's the honor and opportunity for them to join something huge, and it is something valuable, but they are valuable too. So I usually ask people personal questions. I pray for them. I like texting them personal messages. So it's more about relationships, not money.
Right. So it really is. It's more about a relationship. It's more about an invitation to be a part of something that's bigger than you. It's far more that than it is a sales pitch. It's not really a sales pitch. It's not just hey, I have a whiz bang, really nice presentation and you can't help yourself. You're going to have to say yes just because I was so smooth and such a good salesman. And that's not really what we're going for. But that can happen to Americans who try and raise support. We can get that sense. We can get that feel. We could do it wrong and be more about the presentation and the conversation as well. But it sounds like in Ukraine that's a really big thing, that it's not just a smooth presentation, but that you're taking time with the person, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the whole Ukraine. It's just what I realized and what I try to change in our organization, and probably like some other friends and their ministry. But yeah, I cannot speak for a whole country. I do believe it would be at some day, when people
Well, I'm
will.
going to speak for America and say, no, I'm just kidding. Okay. So, as I'm sure we're going to have some listeners that are really interested in how did you have this conversation? Like what's a couple things that you knew you need to take with you into a conversation with someone that probably has never supported any sort of missionary before, and they're in Ukraine or Eastern Europe, and you're going to sit down and you're going to get to know them a little bit. You're going to pray for them. How did you explain the opportunity to partner and it not just be a sales pitch of, act now and you can get to heaven, because that's not what this is, right? This is a partnership in the Great Commission. You're not trying to sell them on something. So how did you explain that to your countrymen that have maybe, that they would not have liked this idea prior to you engaging with them?
Well, yeah, usually me personally, I do not talk to people I don't know. Like there are usually people that I had at least some connection. So it's not like complete strangers on the street, And you want me to practice it with you, Aaron? I can invite you to my ministry.
Please. Yeah, we could practice, but I think for the sake of time, we need to skip like an important part or two.
Yeah, usually I share with Ukrainians, especially, I share about the things they actually know. So, for example, our country calls itself Christian country, but however, many of people, they don't even understand what it means to be Christian and what it means to have a relationship with God. And usually these people, they feel connected because they feel the same, because their relatives probably call themselves Christians, but usually are alcoholics or drug addicted or whatever. So I try to find a connection point. And then I like this, we are, as an organization, or me personally, I am serving with this organization, and that's what I'm doing to help these people see the life and saving relationship with God. So would you like to join us? Would you like to step in? And I usually invite people not like join the financially, but I said, hey, like I know how you serve, for example, if I know them, or I know that there's many things we can do together. Do you want to try, or do you want to hear more about that? And then I can do like follow-up call and talk.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And so that actually is, that just falls in line with a lot of what we teach at the Support Raising Solution boot camps with people, as far as trying to have them understand that, if you're going to invite someone, if you feel like God has called you to invite somebody to be a part of your team, you really should help explain the problem. Like what is the issue, right? And then explain some God infused just ways to address it, the way to fix it, the vision for a godly response to the problem, and once you do that, then it's a lot easier to invite people and say, hey, do you want to be a part of this solution? So it sounds like, even though I'm sure there's different nuances and certainly a different language or two involved, it sounds like your personal fundraising experience, though it has some differences, it sounds like the big rocks, sounds like the big things, they're pretty much the same in Ukraine as they are in South Africa, as they are in the United States, as they are in Brazil, as they are everywhere. So would you agree with that, or would you say there's something extra unique in Eastern Europe that people should be aware of?
No, I do agree, because I think it's partly some culture stuff exists there, but as I said and you said before, it's about heart and mind, and it's all people around the world have these heart issues, so it's more about that. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Well, of course, you and I did not pre-rehearse this conversation. I never pre-rehearse the conversations with the SRS podcast.
Unfortunately, especially with foreigners.
You're doing so well. There's nothing. There would be nothing that I would want to change about this. But I do know still that doesn't mean support raising is easy for really almost anyone. There's very few people I know that were like, oh, support raising, that was the That was just super easy. That doesn't mean that you didn't have, some focus and you didn't have some hard days or easy days. Like they're like it's kind of fluid. But generally speaking, I hear from a lot of people that raise support. They're thankful for the process, but because it's hard, and it's hard everywhere, it's still not always their favorite thing. So is that true of you as well?
It is. It is not my favorite. At the same time, I do see the benefit of it, not in terms of like finances, but the relationship I gain. Like I gain a lot of friends out of it. So which I would never probably had if I wouldn't do it, So yeah, it's still not my favorite process, but I do enjoy getting to know people better. And that's, I think, important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Similarly, at the time we're recording this, so I've been fully funded for a long time, but I actually am doing, Yulia, I'm doing a little end of year support raising because we have a financial need as I go into next calendar year. It's not massive, but it's enough so that I need to give it a little bit of time and focus. And so you're thinking I'm going to ask you for money right now, but I'm not. But I actually have a friend, and we're not super close, but he's a friend, and he's a part of a men's Bible study with me. And just this last week, I invited him to sit down. And so I did. I sat down with him over Zoom video, sat down with him and his wife. And I had told him, I said, hey, I'm doing a little like end of year thing with our ministry. And I'm realizing I've never had an opportunity to share with you more about what it is that I do. And he replied, yeah, I've always wondered about that. Seems like God is using you like all over the place. I know you're really busy. I know you're in missions and you talk to missionaries and all that stuff, but yeah, I want to hear more about it. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's meet online. Let's do a Zoom call because COVID-19 is spiking in our area of the world. And I said, I'd love to sit down with you and your wife if possible. And let's just find an hour, probably won't take a whole hour, but let's find an hour we can sit down and I can share with you more about our ministry and the vision and our budget goals and how God's changing lives. And he said, oh yeah, that'd be great. And so, this is a guy I've been getting coffee with, not weekly, but almost weekly before COVID-19 for about a year. And then for the last, of course, 6, 8, 9 months, I've been seeing him online occasionally because we still do our men's Bible study. Anyway, all this being said, so I would consider him a friend, but not somebody I spent a lot of time with. Well, I had the opportunity to sit down with him and his wife, and I actually got to share more about the ministry that I do and raising and living off support and equipping ministry leaders to survive and thrive. And my organization I work with is called Exago Ministries, but I get to partner regularly with Support Raising Solutions, and they allow me to come in and use my big mouth and pour into ministry leaders and all that stuff. And he was like, "Thank you," because that was so interesting. Because I never knew. Like everything you were doing, that is so cool. Yeah, my wife and he and his wife are like, we think we want to be a part of it. Let us think and talk and pray. And so just yesterday, so this is less than 24 hours from us recording this right now, I followed up, and he and his wife joined my support team. And it's not about the money. Now, I'll be honest, the need of finance is probably what pushed the conversation to happen in the way that it finally did. But honestly, already, Yulia, I already feel like I know him and his wife better. I already feel like they know us better. Like there's more of a healthy intimacy now. And they're excited to be a part of the life change that I get to be a part of through our ministry. And so I say all that to say, you're right on in everything you've said this entire conversation, Yulia. You are right on, and that even though, yes, we need the finances, it's not about the finances. And I would say it's about connecting people to a great commission work that's bigger than you or me. And it also blesses my relationship. So it's still not my favorite either. I heard you say that. It's not your favorite process. And it's not mine either. I don't love calendaring things and sending Zoom links and all that kind of stuff. I don't like that. But I do count that guy as a closer friend now than I would have just a couple of weeks ago. So, I believe that you are walking the walk and talking the talk, and and I am as well. And yet I wouldn't consider either one of us to be experts. I'd say we're more people that have learned to be obedient and follow the Lord in this in our context. So would you agree with that, or how would you say that differently?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Let me tell you one short story.
Yeah,
Last Friday, I had a call with a friend similar to yours. I know him since he was a teenager, like 14 or 13. He visited our camp. Now it's been like 12 years after that. He's a young man. He works in a different country, and we sometimes talk just as a family. We know each other. He knows our kids. He loves to play with them. So I just said, hey, I want to share about what I'm doing with you. And he was like, okay, let's do it. So we also scheduled Zoom call late at night because my kids didn't allow me to do it during the daytime. So we talked for an hour. I shared about my ministry, and I realized that his relationship with God actually is not good. So we ended up praying and deciding to even like go through. So him and my husband, they will start having regular prayer on Zoom. And he obviously didn't agree to support financially, but we agreed to kind of like adopt him, if you can say like that, and just pray for him and help him to go out from his bad situation with God and all of that. So again, if not the financial or even like support raising thing, I would probably never schedule that Zoom call. But it appeared that we can actually help him with his relationships with God. So it's also like, you never know how God can use, but you have to be obedient. Yeah.
Amen. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So true. So true. And yeah, because it was about the money, you wouldn't even stopped to care for him. But because you were engaging, it was like you thought the meeting might be about one thing, but you quickly realized that God had something else in mind, and you shifted, and you're going to be okay, right? Like God's probably going to bring somebody else to join your team, and you're going to be diligent, but that doesn't mean that this person's not very important to you. So
for sure. And what's bigger, his heart or the amount I needed to find?
Amen. Very cool. Well, Yulia, this has been an easy flowing conversation, which is, again, thank you so much for doing this in English, or this just wouldn't happen. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us from Ukraine. And it's my habit as the podcast host to give the guest kind of the final word, so to speak. And so, Yulia, to our people that are listening that might have some connections really anywhere in the world, but particularly to Eastern Europe, and they're thinking that support raising, that's just kind of an American idea. Just, that's not for missionary type people from your part of the world. What would you tell those folks?
Yeah, I would tell it's probably it's some sort of American idea, but actually is the Bible idea. For sure, because God is choosing some people to do his ministry for the full time, and it's not for everyone. And if you are who are listening to us, if you feel like you are the one who's called to be in ministry full time, it means that it's a huge blessing. And if God sends you to the ministry and to do his job, he will provide. And how many times in Bible we can read that, and how many times we experience that in our own life. Just trust God and obey. And it's not going to be fun all the time, but at the end, it's awesome and you will not regret it.
Very cool. Yulia, thank you so much for joining us on the SRS podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.